Blizzard took a look at the parsing meta and they realized it was toxic and they fixed it. And if you are not a parser, I think you are actually the main beneficiary from this change, and I will say it. I cannot believe it, but this is actually amazing. This is a great change. So let's talk about it. Blizzard is adjusting Prepool Resources. Now, what is a Prepool Resource? I will use a vanilla analogy because most of my viewers play Warriors in vanilla and you are gonna understand. You know how before you pull a boss, a lot of people like hitting something else and stacking rage so they can start a boss with 100 rage so they can get a better parse. Well, that is a Prepool Resource. Now, Pandaria has that on steroids because every single DPS almost, to my knowledge, has some sort of proc or charging mechanic. For example, the Shadow Priest with the orbs, which they actually also changed, so they can generate those out of combat, or the soul shards from the Warlock, or the lightning shield from the Elemental Shaman, right? Every class has some little thing that charges up the more damage they do, and without this change, if you wanted to do serious parsing, if you wanted to achieve some decent number in your parses, you had to cheese it. And the parses, I think, are not the people they are targeting, because if you're a parsing, you don't really care about doing that cheesing stuff. You kinda like doing that, I guess. You wanna push for that extra 1% damage this and here and whatever. But the normal players, and there is a lot of parses interacting with normal players in MoP, you know. Not every guild is doing parse runs. They are forced to still play along with this crap and do all the pre-pulling for the parses so the parsers can be happy in your guild. And that is annoying, and that brings a lot of friction in the guild, especially like your average guild, your middle of the road guild, like a guild that kills the bosses and is decent and competent but isn't super serious. That kind of guild. I think they are trying to help those people, which I think are the people they should prioritize, not the top 1% and not the bottom 1% either. I think the people in the middle is absolutely the people they gotta target. But anyway, here is the announcement, okay? They are explaining the entire thing in preparation for the next raid test weekend, which I think is next week, isn't it? Oh, it's today. Look at that. I might try out the Sha. Is on desktop? No, it's not. That's kind of sad. I like that dinosaur guy. Okay, we want to discourage the complicated routines that have emerged where raid teams require players to exit the raid and take different steps to obtain certain resources before a pull. We do not want players to feel like they are at large disadvantage if they do not participate in pre-pull routines. Pretty self-explanatory. If you do not stack a bunch of lightning shield, or if you don't stack a bunch of orbs and you go into a fight, you are in trouble. You are never gonna compete on that high level, and it kinda feels like crap. That is something I feel from Vanilla 2, that no matter how much you try, if you don't get every single little consumable buff, if your buff bar doesn't look like 40 different buffs on it, you are never gonna compete at the top level. And I know if you're paying attention and you're thinking, you might tell me, but isn't that catering to the 1%? I don't think it is, because a huge part of pushing yourself to parsing, and in a vacuum I don't think it's a bad thing to push yourself to do more damage. A huge part of the fun in parsing for a lot of people is having the hope, the dream that someday you can reasonably achieve a good parse if you really try and you apply yourself. And removing all the bull crap that's out of your control, like doing all this cheesing from outside the guild. For example, Warrior King Alaundo, he has to have pretty much an entire raid play for him so he can get those crazy parses. That's what he's forced to do, and that's not throwing shade at him, you know. If you're at the top level, you gotta have that happen or you're not gonna be at the top level. It's just the way it works. So they wanna target that to get people that are kinda in the lower end of things to feel like they can compete, and I think that's great. So these are the principles of the things they are gonna nerf. If you need to involve an enemy at all, so these are the principles of things they are gonna nerf. If you need to involve an enemy at all, for example, if you gotta hit a mob to stack rage, right? That would be one of those conditions. Or if you gotta hit lightning bolts to stack up lightning shield, that would also count as that rule. Second rule is, does casting the spell require a resource that the player does not generate on their own without using a cooldown? There is a lot of cooldowns like slice and dice that give you charges, and you can keep those charges for later on. That would also be some sort of cheesing, so that's gone. And the last one, do you need to take an extra step to manipulate the circumstances for this to work? And they are mentioning Twist of Fate. Twist of Fate is a priest talent, made a Shadow Priest guide by the way. Right here, when you hit a target below 35%, you get a 15% extra damage. That's like your execute bonus. If you hit a mob that's low and then you go hit a boss, you still got that buff, right? right? And it's 15% damage is pretty significant, right? So before these changes, if I wanted to get a good parse on a priest, I would have to look for a mob and like get it below 35% and hit it, and I would have a really big damage buff. It is actually pretty significant, right? I can imagine a couple cheeses you could do where you pull a trash mob into a boss and you ignore that trash mob or you CC it or something, and you just tap it every couple seconds to keep your buff up, and you just use it as a twist of fate battery, so to speak. Actually, I got a bit of a question on that. What if I do that and then I pull the boss, right? Will it count as a pre-pull resource? Yes, if you see a Shadow Priest at the top of a fight, I assure you that's gonna be the cheese they are doing to get at the top. They are just gonna have Twist of Fate on top of them the entire time. That would be funny. That would be really funny. They are also gonna be changing resources because you can, as I said, for example, Rage, you can stack Rage before a pull, so you're gonna start every encounter with 25, which is actually a buff if you are not doing the pre-pull. In practice, it will be a bit of a nerf because most warriors stack Rage and they are tuning Runic Power and Hunter Focus and combo points. This would actually be pretty big. Almost every rogue stacks combo points before an encounter. That's extremely common. And that might actually be a bit of a big nerf for a short fight. It could actually be something you would feel. So the jury is still out on all of this, of course. I don't mean to tell you I know exactly the impact it's going to have on the meta. It will change it just a bit. They are also banning a lot of gear swaps, and a lot of these were actually banned in Warcraft logs already, guys. If I recall correctly, Fell Striker was already banned in Warcraft logs in after vanilla. This is Fell Striker, so we can go back to something we're talking about. This is Fell Striker, so you can understand the logic of what they are doing. It has a proc that it will guarantee crits for 3 seconds, right? So you could, like, for example, hypothetically, hit a mob for a while until you get a proc, and then you immediately pull, right? And you get guaranteed crits for 3 seconds. Keep in mind that in Pandaria, rogues get more combo points with crits, so that would give them a ridiculously strong opener if you can time it right. 3 seconds is a little tight. I don't know in practice if people are actually doing that cheese. That would be kinda crazy, right? But imagine swapping into a vanilla weapon just so you can get a bunch of crits for 3 seconds. Yeah, they don't want to have people doing that to compete on the parses, and of course they are nerfing a bunch of other items like that. Same logic. And they are also, this is big. This is actually big. They are nerfing Vengeance. What is Vengeance? When a tank takes damage, they get more attack power. That's pretty much it, right? So if you want to choose a tanking pool because you are the one person in the world that cares about tanking parses, there's gotta be somebody out there, I guess. What you're supposed to do is take a bunch of damage and then pull the boss, so you got benches already stacked up from the start and you can do more damage. Of course, tank threat is not really a thing anymore in MoP. You got infinite threat pretty much. So I don't think it will make tanking any harder. It will just make tanks do a little less damage if they lose that cheesing option, I guess. I understand they want to be consistent with their logic, but it feels, I don't know, it feels a little really out of their way to go try to combat tank parsing for the 3 people that care about tank parses, you know? And they are listing here all the buffs that they are going to be not applying to this pre-pull because, as I told you before, pretty much every single spec has some sort of charging mechanic that gives you stacks or something like that give you damage in some way. So this is the list of all of that. I am not going to bore you with every spell because, as you can see, it is a lot of them. And they are saying right here that they are open to change. They might put some more in, or they might remove some of them. It's something that they are still considering, but the logic, the reasoning behind this change is actually awesome. This is ridiculously based. Will this change the top 1% of parses? Like, will a person that was getting top 1% before not get it anymore? I don't think so. Like, the people that are willing to go that far just to cheese, to get like a tiny proc to get that little extra damage, those people are gonna be at the top no matter what. But what this generates, and this is a perception, and the perception is ridiculously important for a game, right? It feels like everybody is gonna be on an even playing field. Again, I am not saying it will be, I am saying it feels more that way. And also I think a lot of people in like your average decent guild, they are kind of fed up with all the parser cheesers that force the entire guild to do some annoying stuff just to get that little extra parse. But hey, even if you are one of those parses that like cheesing the fights, I don't think you're gonna be that mad that you cannot cheese the fight anymore as long as everybody else can't either, you know, like even playing field. And yes, here you go, they can indeed make good changes sometimes. I was celebrating the LFR changes too, even if I disagree completely with the class balance changes. I thought that was pretty stupid. This is amazing. And you know what? I would be okay if they took similar steps to change the parsing meta in Classic. Parsing is here to stay, parsing is never going away whether you like it or not, and if Blizzard cares about the game, I think they are gonna have to try to mitigate the damage parsing does to the game. Even if you think parsing is great, there is damage that happens to the game from parsing because of the attitude of people, and fixing those little things that make parsing annoying is actually huge. We are gonna be making a guide for every single spec, so stay tuned. We got 26 to go, and subscribe, join the Discord, and thank you for watching.